Matthew Adams, Manager of Exhibitions for the Walt Disney Archives. So give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Justin. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. Are you excited to see some Disney costumes? So like Justin said, we're going to kind of give you an overview of the exhibit. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the Walt Disney Archives. We were founded in 1970, and our mission is to collect, preserve, and share the history and creative legacy that Walt Disney and the company that he founded. And we're headquartered at the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, California. And our exhibit started really small, like you can see in this photo here. This one was basically just a simple marquee outside of the archives office in Burbank when we moved into our current location in the Frank G. Wells building in 1997. So in 2009, the archives began offering significant archival exhibitions with the D23 Expo, which is the ultimate Disney fan event. If you're familiar, you should be, because you're D23 members, which is held every year in Anaheim, California. And since then, our exhibits have kind of become the cornerstone of that event, and they've just gotten bigger and bigger every year. And in fact, this year, just actually last month, the event was renamed D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan Event, and we presented the largest exhibition that we have ever presented before, a great big, beautiful car show where we featured over 30 cars set in various themed environments and vignettes. It was really exciting to be able to share that with fans. And we've also presented other traveling exhibits such as Inside the Walt Disney Archives and Walt Disney and El Grupo, which is now touring in Central and South America. And then also our newest exhibition, which is the 15,000 square foot Disney 100, the exhibition, is currently touring the world. We're open at Union Station in Kansas City right now, and then next month we'll be opening in Seoul, South Korea. And it will be continuing to tour for the next couple of years. And that show features over 250 artifacts like props and memorabilia and costumes and attraction vehicles and animation art and everything you could possibly think of. It's definitely our flagship exhibition. So let's get specific into the costumes in this exhibition and the archive's overall collection. When the archive started collecting costumes, we only had a few. In fact, we only had one rack. And in 2006, the archives began a more aggressive campaign to create a comprehensive costume collection, and we expanded into exhibitions. So to tell you a little bit more about that, I would love to introduce you to the lovely Kelsey Williams. Please give her a round of applause. So Kelsey, can you share with us a peek in the criteria and methodology for acquiring the costumes at the archives?
I would love nothing more. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're so excited to have you all. So you might be thinking, okay, there's a lot of Disney movies, and each one of them can have hundreds, if not thousands, of costumes. So what's the criteria for them to make it into the archives collection? And that's a great question, and something we've taken years and years and years to really figure out. How do we build our collection? What are those foundational pieces that we have not only for a historical standpoint, but also for traveling exhibitions like this? So you look here, you see very iconic costumes. So if we're talking about something like Beauty and the Beast or Pirates of the Caribbean, you're of course going to take Captain Jack Sparrow or Belle's beautiful gold gown. So those very iconic pieces or those very iconic characters, we always have at least one look or one of those key looks for each of those different changes. But there are, of course, always exceptions. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, we also have theme parks in our collection. So we have, of course, film, we have television, we have theme parks. So you can really imagine the bulk of different costumes that fits into our collection. But, like I said, there's always exceptions to those rules. It's not always just iconic pieces. Something like Dick Van Dyke. He, of course, was in Mary Poppins Returns. He was not his original character, Bert, but it's Dick Van Dyke. So how do you not take his costume? He only shows up in one scene, has a pretty minor role, but the actor as well as him reoccurring in Mary Poppins film is just so iconic. You have to have something like that to come into the collection. Now, you might see this really interesting photo. So when we go to a production, every single production, whether it's film, television, theme parks, works very differently with how they interact with their costuming. So generally, we'll have kind of first right of refusal as an archive. So we'll watch the project, and as archivists, we'll say, we would like to have these various pieces. So sometimes we get not the prettiest amount of stuff. Sometimes they will just give us racks. They look like this. They're in costume bags. They're a little awry. They might be kind of mix-mash, and it's not always the most beautiful thing you might receive as an archive. And with requests like that, when it comes in a little more messy, we then have to go through and do all the research to make sure we have every piece for every costume we requested, line them up, and really do a lot of that piecemealing together. However, sometimes, something like Mary Poppins Returns, we get a beautiful thing like this, where we get beautiful boxes. Every costume is organized into the boxes and labeled exactly how we asked them. So it's quite nice. It does not happen very often. Most of the time we have to do more of that deeper research. But we're archivists, so you know what? It's okay. To get it perfect, that's what you have to do sometimes. But once we receive pieces like these, it's really not done. They don't just land on our loading dock and we say, all right, we're all set. You have to then go through the whole process of an archives. So this includes photographing all the pieces. We have to catalog them. We have to do condition reports to see what state they come to us in. We have to then rehouse them and put them into our storage facility. So it's quite a big process once we get these pieces. Sticking to our wonderful Mary Poppins Returns here, you can see even some cases we get them where they're labeled beautifully. The costume not only is very iconic in the looks, but there's a tag that'll say who the character is or how the piece was used, whether it's a hero piece, which was worn by the main character, or more of a stunt item. There's a few different variations also we can receive. So you can see a few more examples here. Just quite beautifully, lots of detail. We love to see this. But with such an extensive collection, this really brought us to the idea of we have to do a costume exhibition, but really, how do we do that? What is the creative behind taking these beautiful pieces in our collection and creating an exhibition out of them? So that brings us to Heroes and Villains, the Art of the Disney Costume. We have 70 costumes that span 60 years, from Return to Witch Mountain in 1978 to Peter Pan and Wendy, which takes us to 2023, so quite a big span of time. And we really wanted to show these costumes through the eyes of the designers that created them. That's a really important part because they are really the backbone of what made the creative vision come to life. So if we get started, here we have three different, so we can kind of see the exhibition we have. It's been to a few different venues over time, and as we have it, it kind of shapes and it becomes modular based on the space we go to. So it debuted at the D23 Expo in 2019, and generally it's laid out into the creatives of heroes, villains, and then our anti-heroes, kind of the characters that fall in the spaces in between. So you'll see that in the space we have. We also have a gallery that's all about Cinderella and more of a workshop feel. But you can see here, there's three different kind of layouts from past venues we've been to, and you'll see, honestly, one of my favorite layouts of this exhibition is probably what you're about to see. Arlington had a beautiful amount of space, so we really got to lay out everything and get it lots of room to breathe and some beautiful projections brought in as well. All right, so next we're going to kind of go into the talk about Cinderella and talk about the Cinderella workshop space. So here we really wanted to do a case study on Cinderella. She's a beautiful character, obviously very iconic Disney character that was portrayed first in animation, but then has been brought to life in many different iterations in the Disney realm. So we really wanted to do those not only through the costume designer that brought them to life, but really show the films and the theme of the film. So here we of course have Brandy. This is from the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella. We have Once Upon a Time, which was the television variation, Into the Woods, and then we have Cinderella, the live action film as well. And then going really into those themes again. So the overarching theme of the exhibition is really about the costumes through the costume designers, what details they put into it, what research they did to develop the character, and what those visuals are that bring that character and their feelings and their emotions to life. But we also wanted to add a more creative lens on the exhibition as well. And we really thought of a million different ways to display a costume exhibit. The costume designers really tell the story themselves, but thematically displaying them through the heroes and villains and the anti-heroes lets you not only see the more stereotypical of like the dark hues for the villain, the bright colors for the hero, but also elevating that even more and showing those intricacies that the costume designers bring into really making those characters stand out. All right, so next we're going to move into even more to talk about the Cinderella Gallery. In particular, there's also a really special video in this space that really talks from the costume designers themselves that talk about the characters coming to life. So we actually had a really special production where we got this custom video made. So here you'll see some behind the scenes shots from that shoot. So all the character variations we spoke about Cinderella, they actually came to life via the costume designers on the set here, and they had interpretations of what their actual workshop is for the set. So first we're going to hear from one costume designer, a short video. This is Sandy Powell. She was the costume designer from the Cinderella live action film.
Yes, I suppose that the transformation scene was something that I had to think about. How does the dress happen? I mean, I knew that the visual effects department were going to take care of that, but one of the reasons I came upon the idea of using butterflies as part of the decoration was I was thinking about how the transformation would happen, and that Cinderella, we've already established, is at one with nature. She's friends with the animals, and I thought, you know, it'd be quite good if maybe the butterflies land on her dress as part of that scene. The butterflies come together to help make the dress, as it were, land on the dress, and then they became part of the decoration. So that was my little contribution to that moment. But definitely I was working alongside the visual effects team all the way through, really, with not just her transformation scene, but when the fairy godmother appears, and how the mice turn into horses and the lizards turn into the footmen and stuff like that.
All right, we have a next video, which this is from the costume designer Colleen Atwood. This is from Into the Woods.
The Woods in Into the Woods is one of the characters in the story, in a sense. The woods is a reference to the woods in our minds, in our souls, and in our lives. So for me, the woods and the texture of the woods, the colors of the woods were definitely kind of starting points. The wolf's costume, for instance, was almost like a wood pattern and a fur pattern combined that I had embroidered on silk and then made the suit out of that. Cinderella's costume was reminiscent of the silvery leaves of a willow tree in the wind. So there's little references all the way through the movie that sort of refer back to a kind of woodland world, per se.
We really wanted to understand the method of the designers and get those deeper stories of what brings the costumes we have on display to life.
Whitney Houston was involved in the beginnings of pre-production. She went on tour, I believe, during our pre-production stage. So I would send her sketches and make corrections or listen to her notes and get everything together for when she came back and when she was going to be with us. She had absolutely the overview of what we were planning to do, and when she came in, she walked into her costume and came out and sang. It doesn't get better. I chose gold because it was a beautiful compliment to Whitney. We actually, because we had Klimt, the director, Rob Iskov, he was a very, very big fan of the Klimt idea, Gustav Klimt, the painter. And they were gold layers and gold geometrics, and everything had a very rich and kind of Art Nouveau glamorous feel to it. And he had said, can we absolutely do that gold somewhere? Where should we do it? then I seem to remember him saying, I would love it on on Whitney. Do you think we could do it? And that's basically the reason why.
All right, next I'm going to turn it over to Matthew again. We can learn about some unique ways that we elevated this costume on display.
And before we do that, I realized I neglected to tell you who Kelsey Williams is. She is our exhibition's creative lead, so she's really the creative mastermind behind all of our exhibitions. So apologies for not sharing that. But yes, so as Kelsey mentioned, not only did we want to display these costumes, we really wanted to make sure that they were displayed in a way that conveyed their emotions as their characters wearing the costumes. So a lot of that came from creating custom mannequins that reflect really iconic moments from the films that they are from, to really embody their characteristics and that let you know who they are instantly. So here you see some examples of Fairy Godmother from Cinderella and the Witch from Into the Woods. Here's a few more examples that kind of show you the contrast of the live action shot as a reference and then how that translated into a really dynamic and interesting mannequin pose here. And so once they go through this design process, then the mannequins get created and they get delivered to us where they look something like this, which I find to be an actually horrifying image. But as you can see here, this is the mannequins after they're delivered to us before they get dressed, which is a really wild scene to see. But here's a few behind the scenes shots from some of our workrooms where we do test fittings on the mannequins just to make sure that the costume's fitting just right, because all the mannequins are made to the actors' proportions. A few more images here, so you see that the mannequins are getting dressed, getting ready to go out on their big tour. They're really excited. And so once we have the fittings done and making sure that everything looks good, then the next step in the process is to photograph everything, because it's one thing to photograph the costume itself, but putting it on a mannequin, especially in these custom poses, really brings it to life. And what's interesting about the photography process is it actually comes with a really unique set of challenges, because every costume is made from a different material, and so that's going to present how is it lit, how does it need to be photographed, and so our team spends a lot of time really perfecting the photography process to make sure that it's captured the way it was meant to be intended. And what we end up with are these really incredible detailed shots that show you the details on these costumes that you probably are not going to notice on film. But it really goes to show the amount of craft and attention to detail that goes into these costumes, and that really is the Disney difference, putting in the effort and time into something that you may not even see on screen when you're watching the film, but it's there, and it still really creates the essence of the character. It helps the actor's performance in a way, because all of these details really tell you exactly who the character is through their costume. And speaking of details, another special part of this exhibit was the opportunity to work with Disney Editions to turn this into a one-of-a-kind exhibition into a companion book, which coincidentally you can buy out in the gift shop. And after this presentation, we'll do a little bit of Q&A with you, and then Kelsey and I will also be signing these books for you, which you can purchase right outside in the museum gift shop. And so to wrap it up, I think it's very fitting to end our conversation with a comment from the costume designer of Once Upon a Time, Eduardo Castro.
I'm so excited to have the costumes from Once Upon a Time in the archives over at Disney. It means so much to me because these were costumes that meant so much to a lot of people. I've never been on a show where the fandom was so amazing, and the letters that I got, and people really related to these costumes. And it's so many times costumes are made and then they become disbanded and they're sold off or they're auctioned off, and then they get lost into a certain world. And it means so much to me that the archives have kept these things and kept them for posterity. and hopefully they will be enjoyed by other generations and other people to see, because I'm so proud of not my design so much, but the work that was involved in creating them.
Great. So I'm going to invite Kelsey back up. We'll do a little bit of Q&A before we turn you loose to go see all the amazing costumes that we just talked about.
Does anyone have a question? Any hands?
We answered all your questions.
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. They do. Their arms detach, their torsos detach. It's a really comical process, and sometimes because their legs are over here, their torsos are over here, and usually you have to take their arms off to get them into jackets and shirts and things like that. So it usually, and especially when you go in and you see a mannequin like Beast, which is massive, you will see just how difficult it is to dress something like that.
And what else is really cool is because we get them custom made, we know what the different costume pieces are that we're dressing. So if we have somebody like, we have a Dove Cameron costume from Descendants in our All the Glitters side of the costume exhibit, she's got like gloves, but she has quite tiny wrists, so you don't want to harm the gloves, of course. So like you have to make it with a removable thumb. So you make sure you're very careful to insert it. So she still visibly has a whole hand, but you don't want to harm the piece. So something like that, or removable fingers for rings. Every single detail has to be kind of taken into account when constructing it. So all the pieces look perfect.
Is there a specific costume we should pay close attention to the detail on? Something that we wouldn't notice if you didn't point it out?
I really love from Tomorrowland, the little girl Athena. If you look really closely, the detailing in her is actually a sequence of numbers that creates the pattern. And it's something that most people don't realize. It just looks like a very vintagey, fun dress, but the fabric on it, I think in general, just look at the fabrics. Like, don't just take in the costume in total, but really take that step closer and look from top to bottom at all the textiles and all the textures, because every one of them is like really spectacular.
Yeah, to echo that, you can really get pretty close, up close and personal with these costumes. So you're going to be able to see those details that we were talking about that you're not going to see on film, but you have the chance to see here.
What was the most difficult piece to acquire in the collection? Was there like any that had a difficult story fit to you, or was it hard to...
I don't know that any are difficult. Usually we're very lucky working for Disney that everyone appreciates and understands. We've gotten really good at kind of going door to door for the various different films and different production lines to be like, hey, we exist, please, we are your archive, we want to collect your history, and luckily everyone's pretty well giving us pieces. I think geographically is probably the hardest piece. There's different productions from around the world. We have a lot in London. Some come from on remote locations, like I think Disenchanted filmed in Ireland. Lots of different geographic locations that things make it their way to us.
What was your favorite piece, like when you saw it, you just were like, aha, like, oh my gosh, right? And got really excited about it.
In this show or in general in our collection?
In general, your collection, or do the existing YouTube, which one you want to do for this collection?
I am maybe the #1 Enchanted fan in the whole entire world. So when I saw all the costumes we had from the film Enchanted, I just swooned so hard. And in this exhibit, we have Edward's costume, and it's as grand as you expect. He's got the larger than life shoulder pieces. He's got like every detail on it and the different materials. It's spectacular.
I think for me, it would probably be the costumes and the spell book in our collection from Hocus Pocus, just because that goes back to my childhood. It really digs deep into the nostalgia. So we have our spell books that are touring with our Disney 100 exhibition, and we have the costumes for the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus 2 here in this exhibition. Anybody else? Oh, yep. That's a great question, because I don't think there is a correct answer. Every single person on our team comes from a really unique and diverse background. For example, my background is theater. Kelsey, you worked in communications and PR. We do have people that come with museum studies and archival backgrounds. We have people that worked at the parks and they found their way to the archives, and we really value those different backgrounds because there's pieces of it from your background that are very valuable to what we do now. So there's really not one set path that gets you to where you are at the Walt Disney Archives.
Is there a piece in your entire collection that's the most fragile?
That's so tricky. There's a lot of different fragile elements. So things when we talk about, we have a huge document collection as well. So it's not just like dimensional pieces. So if we're talking about something that's, we have the original contract that started the Disney company from October 16th, 1923. So it's like very much a one-of-a-kind piece that is paper. So something like that, of course, over time you have to be very careful. We have original artwork that can be very fragile, or also in our documentation, we have a lot that's on like onion skin paper, so it's like thinner than parchment. We have a lot of like plush dolls that are from the early 30s that are quite fragile. We have pieces that are sometimes come to us made of foam. There's so many different categories of fragility, but we take care of all of them, and everyone in our collections team especially really assesses the piece, and we make sure that we're protecting it and storing it the best way possible.
How do you go about acquiring either props or costumes from film or television that predates when the archives were established?
Yeah, so a lot of the pieces that predate, we were founded in 1970 by one gentleman named Dave Smith. He was kind of a one-man show for quite a while, and Dave got really good at literally walking around, knocking on doors, and saying, hey, what do you do? We have an archives now. Let me look around your spaces, your offices. And a lot of it, he was like, we're gonna take these. And he found things from people's offices to sometimes broom closets. Anywhere you can imagine, Dave did a really fantastic job of really getting us pieces. We also got really lucky because in terms of costuming, Disney had a costuming department back in the day, and that's where a lot of pieces, after they finished, just went to costuming, and sometimes they would be used in productions down the line. They could just rent them and use them as background actors. So luckily, a lot of those, not all of them were identifiable, or like tagged, but Dave got to go through there, and Becky Klein, our director as well, that department was kind of diminished at one point, and they got to go and find all the pieces. There was a lot of jewels that were hidden in there as well. So that's really the foundation of our department, is really just kind of knocking on doors, and then the costuming department as well.
Did either of you ever get to meet Dave Smith?
I did, multiple occasions actually. Yeah, such a wonderful, wonderful man. He cares about Disney more than anybody you can ever imagine. So I had the honor of meeting him quite a few times. Did you get to meet him?
No,
Oh, okay.
You mentioned costumes from the parks, and I didn't know what was it character costumes? Was it cast member costumes? What kind of things do you love from the parks?
Both of them. Honestly, anything you can imagine. So because we are the corporate archive, anything parks, whether it is like parade costumes, whether it's front of line cast member in various areas, whether it is full-on character costumes, or like Mickey celebrating the Disney 100. We got like the full outfits that they wear whenever there was a big celebration. Just about any costume you can think. Oh, audio animatronic figures. Whenever an animatronic figure, their costume, we get those looks as well. So anything in the realm of costuming, yeah.
I think we're about time for this, so thank you all so much for joining. I think we have the Crown Jewels presentation in, I think, about an hour or so. But until then, enjoy the exhibit, enjoy some food, and thank you all so much. And we'll be signing books for you out in the back.